Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today I want to talk about my Uber boss project and trying to make a tier list based on my experience and my personal preference, basically about all of the bosses that I've defeated, each 100 times. It's not like the biggest sample size, but I'm a one-man army, so in that case it was fine to do. It was a 700 Uber bosses in total, and today I want to go over the spreadsheets a little bit about the profits or the losses. How was it to kill those bosses? How hard are they to do? And so on, and trying to figure out kind of a tier list. Maybe it helps you for the further or upcoming leagues if you want to do bossing or just not want to do bossing, basically, right? So first of all, a disclaimer: this is highly influenced by my personal opinion since I've done those bosses. So some bosses that I liked to kill more are maybe the ones that you say like, oh boy, I hate this boss, or like the loot table or something like that. It will also be ranked about the profitability, as well as, like, as I said, the speed clearing and so on and so forth. If you have a different opinion than me, then this is totally fine. This is just like my kind of take on the Uber bosses. We're going to talk about the Eater of Worlds, Searing Exarch, Maven, Cortex, the Uber Shaper, Uber Elder, and of course the Uber Sarus in that order. So first of all, if we start right into it, we got, or the first one that I've done was 100 Uber Eater of Worlds. I did 100 of those, and I had a profit of around about 43 divines, with the total investment of about 123 divines. So the big money makers here is obviously the Ashes of the Stars, which is actually kind of the only big ticket item. There are some Forbidden Flesh and Flames, or at least the Forbidden Flesh is the blue version, that are worth quite a bit. Like perfectly rolled Melting the Flesh can also go for a bit, but as I said, the big ticket item would be an Ashes of the Stars, or maybe like 2 or 3 Forbidden Flesh jewels. And honestly, I think this boss is really a gamble. So if we say like, if we do like speed, profitability, as well as difficulty, speed is obviously an S tier, because I think Uber Eater can actually die in the opener if he's getting locked down in a cast sequence of his like beam or something. You're actually able, based on your DPS, that you're gonna skip all the instances or transitions where the immunity phases, basically, right? Which makes this boss super good to farm. Based on the price, it's around about like 1 divine, maybe 1.5 based on the market. And honestly, I think this is like a very risky boss to farm. You could farm, like, I was super lucky dropping like 3 Ashes of the Stars, which is not common. I would say maybe 1 in 50. If I compare this one to like the Searing Exarch, what is the special drop there? If I let me quickly check the Omniscience, for example. On Uber Maven, it would be the Progenesis Flask, and I roughly had around about 2 drops per 100. So basically, you can say 1 drop per 50 bosses might be the average. I was actually lucky with 3, so if I had 1 less Ashes of the Star drop, I would actually break even. Means I have no profit while still fighting the boss. And as I said, I think I was lucky, and I made actually only a bit of profit. So if you take a look at the tier list, I would put the Uber Eater, as I said, based on farming, it would be an S tier. Based on the profit, it would be more of a C tier. The speed, as I said, was very, very fast. You can do like 100 of those in the matter of like, I don't know, like 2-3 hours based on your build. So I would say this is more like of a B tier, because, as I said, fast to farm, but still very risky. Let's take a look at the Uber Searing Exarch, which is kind of the same as the Uber Eater of Worlds. They are both like similar in the speed. If he gets locked down in a cast animation with his like annihilation or something, you are actually able to kill him before any meteor phases. So Uber bossing is all about damage. Like, if you really consider doing like Uber boss farming, you need a build that has like shit tons of DPS. And I'm not talking about 10 or 20 million, I'm talking about hundreds of millions of DPS, if not a billion. Like, my build had like around about 1 billion DPS. So whenever I could hit the boss, it was a matter of like 1 second to kill it. I mean, obviously, early in the league, it's like hard to do builds with that amount of damage, but a good or a well-designed miner build, I think, can easily reach like 100 million or more DPS early in the league with like a 10 divines budget or something like that. I'm not the best, like, I have no experience about miners. I just know miners are usually the go-to way of farming Uber boss because of the high or ridiculous burst damage that you can have and need to kill those bosses pretty fast. So I think Searing Exarch is harder, in my opinion, than the Eater of Worlds, because Eater of Worlds, if you have like a good amount of sustain about life regen, maybe overlage or something, you can get through the impossible or impossible escape, impossible doom, something like this phase, you know, where you have to like step into the circles. But other than, I think the meteor phase is actually where stuff gets really, really rough. The meteors hit like a truck. If you, like most builds, cannot even tank one, and if you can tank one, you still need a high amount of regen to actually sustain yourself to maybe be able to tank a second one. I think there's like, in the Uber version, like 20, 21 waves of magma things, you know, while fighting this like big Minotaur. I think this is like not the biggest issue, but the waves are kind of horrible. And then it can happen that you actually, like the Searing Exarch gets attackable again. You attack him one single time and he instantly gets into the next phase. So the Uber Searing Exarch, in my opinion, is harder, but it's a little bit less of a gamble. Yes, there is the Omniscience is worth a lot less than the Ashes of the Stars, but there is a lot of Forbidden Flame jewels that sell a lot. I had like one for like 90 divines, another one for like 40 divines, and then we had like a couple of like 6, 7, 8 divines, you know. So I had a profit of 76 divines with the same amount of investment as the Eater of Worlds. But still, this is also one of the bosses, in my opinion, which is highly, like, fast to farm, but still very risky. You could do 100 of these bosses and actually lose, like, 30, 40 divines, or you maybe make, like, 30, 40 divines if you're a bit more on the lucky side, right? So I would say Eater of Worlds and Searing Exarch are both B tier. As I said, speedy to farm, but still, like, risky to do. But still, I think the Eater of Worlds is a higher B tier than the Searing Exarch. Good, let's talk about the Maven. So the Maven basically is 130 divines investment. I made a 70 divines profit over here. And the good thing here is that you can drop Awakened gems, and I had not a single Awakened Enlighten, Empower, Enhance. There is also a bunch of Awakened gems. I think the Farmability, I think she's not the hardest boss. You still need to know how to manage her orbs and everything. But as I said, if you know the Maven fight well, it's not the hardest boss, right? And definitely better to farm. I think it's nicely designed for profit because the amount of elevated sextant, orb of conflicts that you can like sell in bulk, I think just the elevated sextants is almost like a guaranteed drop. I had like 100 of those, so yeah, it is basically a guaranteed drop. And they basically sold for what is that, wait a second, that is like 7,700 divided by 230, which means I had like 33 divines just flat profit of the Awakened elevated sextants, and that is not even considering bulk selling, right? Orb of conflicts, the same thing. There are some Awakened support gems that are highly desirable. For example, like I think Spell Cascade. Then you have like Multi-Strike and something like that. So I think Maven definitely better than the other two. So I would give Maven a straight up an A tier. It's not the fastest find, but still I think Maven is really profitable. Let's go on to the next one, which is the Uber Cortex, which is actually the only one where I actually lost 75 divines or close to 75 divines farming this boss. And the reason for that is, first of all, they kind of changed how the Cortex works, okay? Usually, Cortex, like, I did the map as well as the boss, okay? So the map used to drop, or at least the monsters could drop synthesized items. So you could have a good shot on getting like a +1 power charge ring, a +1 frenzy charge ring, an onslaught ring, and I don't know, like those kind of synthesized implicits that are selling for quite a bit. Explodey Bow, for example, for like an EK Ignite, it can sell like towards like 100, 200 divines based on that, but they removed all of that. Instead, they added that Cortex itself can or will drop 3 rare items with 3 less common synthesized modifiers, okay? And I basically had like 1 drop that I say was like sellable or did sell in the end. It was like an energy shield base with aura effect implicit, but none of the others. No power charge, no nothing. Might be that I got unlucky, but in the end of the day, the bottled phases are not worth too much. When I did those, it was like 2 or 3 divines per piece. If it's a good roll, you definitely get more. Nebulises are an item from the past with like the old aura stackers, not really worth anything. Garbage Ephemeral or Offering of the Serpent, everything is like kind of dog shit. There is the Rational Doctrine jewel that actually sells for like 25 divines, but I did not drop a single one. I consider that super unlucky. I think it's like the same drop rate as the Ashes of the Stars, the the Progenesis Flask. So I should have dropped 1 or 2 of these jewels, but still, if I would drop them, I would still lose currency. So in terms of like the difficulty of the boss, it is based on your build. My build had no problems. It was an original Sin build where I ignored the enemy chaos resistance and I also deal only chaos damage. But the Cortex can become rough if you're like an elemental based build and the map rolls with like 80% max res, for example, or you know, like all these kind of modifiers that actually kind of disable your build. I think it's not the hardest bosses to do, but the modifiers could really determine if this is like a super fast run for you or a really rough run, comparing like a Wave 30 Simulacrum. You know, if you play a lightning based build and the monsters have 80 max lightning res and something like that, you're gonna feel like you're doing absolutely no damage. So as I said, I think the bosses are doable. The map itself drops the average currency stuff, you know, but still at the end of the day, it takes quite a long time to do the entire map and the boss. The boss drops are not really that strong as well, and the synthesized items cannot drop anymore. So I would say Cortex, for me, is a D tier. You know, as I said, takes a while, and the drops are not that good either. Next on the list is the Uber Shaper. And Uber Shaper was like one of the cheapest ones. It was like a 34 divines investment for 100 Uber Shapers coming from the fragments of Hydra, Chimera, Phoenix, and Minotaur. And just killing the Shaper rewards you with one of the fragments of either knowledge or shape. Means we have 78 chaos investment and we get 100% guaranteed 150, 160 chaos back. So we basically, we run the map and we double our investment just by killing the boss. And then there is like a shit ton of items that can drop and that are worth quite a bit. For example, a Sublime Vision, I found one with Hatred selling for like 120 divines or something like that. There is like other items that can drop, but in the end of the day, really good boss to farm. I think it takes a bit longer, but it's probably Shaper, I think, or I assume, is like one of the easier ones. I would actually put Shaper into the S tier just for the sake it is cheap farm. You know, it's like the cheapest of all of them, and you are guaranteed to make profit. It's just the question is how much profit you're making. Other than the other Uber bosses, they have a certain high investment with like over a divine or something, and then you still need to be lucky to drop one of the good items that are items for meta builds that are actually selling for quite a bit. Then next on the list, we have the Uber Elder. This one is quite expensive. We have the fragment of knowledge and Shaper, which are basically the Shaper drops. So each set is going for around about 2 divines, which is, I think, the most expensive one that we had. And we had a total of 60 divines profit. I personally really enjoyed the fight of the Uber Elder just because I've killed so many Uber Elders in the past leagues, so it was not really hard for me, but this like Shaper phase without the Sana Bubble and stuff like that can be a bit tricky and rough. Something like Molten Shell and stuff helps really a lot. So let's take a look at the loot. Most of the loot is actually kind of trash, besides the Void Forge, which I didn't drop a single time. And thinking about, hey, or at least I dropped one Void Forge, which is actually perfectly rolled. It was actually pretty good, but they're still going for quite a bit, somewhere about 10 to 15 divines for the bad rolled ones, and then, you know, sky's the limit. The better your weapon, the more currency you're gonna get. There is also a shit ton of Watcher's Eyes. In comparison, I dropped like 29 Watcher's Eyes that sold for about 48,000 Chaos Orbs. Which means that if I would sell them unidentified, I would get like a 43,000. So I was a bit more lucky when it comes to identifying, but some of these Watcher's Eyes can go for a really, really high price. Let's see what I have here. I had one for 60 divines. Here is one for 50 divines, another one for 55 divines. So it is like quite some investment, but still you're gonna get quite some money back based on the stuff here. So Sublime Vision can drop, as far as I heard. People also like said in like after my Uber Elder video that it can drop. It dropped for them. I personally had not a single Sublime Vision drop, but as I said, from the Uber Shaper can also be worth quite a lot. So in terms of like the farming speed, it's definitely faster than something like Shaper, obviously, because you still have like a lot of like immunity phases. But I say like from the speed, I would say it's more like a Maven, like a, you know, like a 2 minutes fight or something like that. Definitely faster than Shaper and Cortex. And but also like the most expensive one. So I would still rank this like lower than Maven, but higher than the Eater of Worlds and Searing Exarch. And then last but not least, we have the Uber Sarus, in my opinion, probably the hardest one based on your build. You know, you have like completely random storms every time Sarus goes into a phase, spawns another storm. There is like degens on the floor. Like, if you don't have a lot of DPS, this fight gets ridiculously hard, and you need like a lot of stuff to actually sustain this kind of boss. As I said, if you have low DPS, this fight is going to be a nightmare, because especially in the last phase, there's going to be so many like degen floors, and they really hurt, right? And they can also be like soaked in the labyrinth, and just like, you know, you have to run through them to get out of the labyrinth. So on the way out, you could basically die and stuff like that. It's not like the easiest one. But overall, I made like 120 divines profit. We got like a lot of like support gems. Only 2 of them were actually worth something here, with like 16 divines and 15 divines. Then we have a lot of like Thread of Hopes and actually 2 massive ones. And this is like the thing. The boss itself is really cheap. It's like the same price of the Uber Shaper. So we have just the normal casual what is it, Conqueror fragments to get into the Sarus fight, and then you just do it Uber. So we basically talk about a 33 divines investment, the exact same price or roundabout on the market as the Shaper. Shaper has 100% profit. The Uber Sarus does not have 100% profit, but I personally don't really see, if you just get one single Thread of Hope and Massive, you're already making profit. It's like one item in 100 runs to make profit. Even if you don't drop any of those, you will still be rewarded with a lot of like Thread of Hopes based on the rolls. You have the Awakened Support Gems, you have the Orits, and it sells for quite a bit. The Reliquary Keys, obviously, the Awakener Orbs, the Orb of Dominances. I think Uber Sarus drops a lot of stuff that is worth quite a bit, and the investment is very low, but it's still like very what do you say, hard to do. So I would say Sarus, I think, should still be A tier, maybe like lower A tier or higher B tier. I still enjoyed like Elder more, but Sarus is like from the profitable way. I mean, if you all say like, hey, about speed, we have a complete different tier list. About profit, we have a different tier list, right? It always depends about how do you enjoy the fights. I think, like, as I said, Searing Exarch, Eater of Worlds are a gamble. Sarus is, like, harder, but I don't see a way where you could actually lose currency on that. Maybe it's actually above Sarus, but Elder, like, above Elder, but I think Elder is easier to do and still, like, profitable in the long run, same as Maven. But I think Shaper is like a no-brainer. You're guaranteed to make profit. Maven is very hard to lose currency. Sarus the same way. Elder is a bit more RNG with the Watcher's Eyes. These two have only like 1 or maybe 2 drops that are actually worth something. All the rest is like trash. And Cortex, for me, by far the worst one. All right, this basically summarizes up my Uber boss project. I hope you find this information valuable. Maybe there might be a good way of doing like Shaper rotations for the next season. I don't know which of them these are. The Guardian one is, right? But you could just farm Guardians, then the Invitation, and then Uber Shaper, and then you do the Guardians again, and always like blast the Invitations to make more and more profit. And since the Shaper is actually 100% profit, I don't see a way where you could ever lose currency over here other than like Cortex or Searing Exarch, Eater of Worlds, or some form of these kind of bosses. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.